Best of R / Malicious Compliance episode 120. Subscribe for Reddit videos daily. This is a story about my younger cousin, whom I'll call Ellie, 15 at the time, for the sake of privacy. My extended family and I went to McDonald's at our nearest mall. McDonald's has this phone app where you can use coupons to get extra fries or save a little money. One of the rules for the app is that you can only use one coupon per phone. Ellie knew this, and prepared to make 2 separate transactions. She was trying to order food for her and her little sister, Anna, again not her real name. Anna gave Ellie her phone so that when Ellie ordered for her, she could use her coupon. Ellie walks up to the register with 2 phones in hand, hers and Anna's. And the minute Ellie walked up, the employee scowled. Ellie starts ordering for herself and scans her coupon from her own phone. She finishes her transaction and begins to start ordering for her sister. The employee immediately says no, only 1 coupon per person. And Ellie says yes, I'm ordering for someone else. The employee again, scowling, yelling no, you have 2 phones, you can't do that. Ellie gestures to Anna saying I'm ordering for her. The employee says no, you can't use the coupons. This went on for quite a while and I could see Ellie and the employee arguing from a few meters away, and that she wasn't technically breaking any rules if she was ordering for 2 different people from 2 different phones with 2 different transactions. Ellie at this point was quite annoyed, and what she did next seemed to really anger the lady even more. She wasn't going to give up on the coupons, so she gestured to Anna, telling her to come over. She thrust the phone into Anna's hands and then said she's ordering, and then she repeated the order, saying she wants. The lady was quite angry at this point, but she reluctantly let her use the coupon and went through with the order. My aunt was laughing a few yards away. She was curious to see the rating and reviews for that McDonald's, and when we checked it out, they had 2 stars. Thank you. Next. I used to work at a drive-up storage facility. We had pretty cheap prices and a few deals, so we got 3 types of people renting. Thank you. Next. In my university, there are usually 2 regular award periods, each at the start of a new term. During them, a ton of scholarships and awards are up for grab. Additionally, throughout the year, there are special scholarship applications because the donors want the money to go out right away. In my second year, one such scholarship opened in December. Its requirements, however, were way more than it's worth, but any free money is good money. The donors offered 4 awards, each valued at $5,000, for the best students in engineering. The eligibility criteria included a 2-page essay on your leadership qualities and community contribution, and 2 letters of reference from professors on top of a minimum 85% degree average. Keeping in mind that this is December, which is the month of finals, students are incredibly busy studying and taking exams while profs are preoccupied with grading, dealing with leniency requests, and such. Needless to say, there are few students who would, or could, apply. Fortunately for me, I already had 2 reference letters ready for a competition I was in earlier in the year. I only had to ask the profs to readdress the letter, which they happily did. I got the award and the money was applied directly to my tuition account. Fast forward to January's regular scholarship period. When I was applying, I noticed the same special award was reopened for application. My guess is that they didn't have enough qualified students the first time. My initial thought was, oh, I got the award, probably can't reapply. But upon reading the fine prints, there was nothing that prevents me from reapplying. Just to make sure, I sent an email to the award committee, asking about it. Came a short reply email that said just comply with the award terms and conditions. If they didn't say you can't, then go ahead. I saved the entire application instructions in this email, then submitted the same package as last time. I didn't think I would get it again, but I was throwing a squid at the wall to see if it sticks. It did. I got the award and the money applied to my tuition account. On top of all other scholarships, I got a check back, totaling almost $5,000. About 2 weeks later, I got 2 of the same email asking for a bio and a picture to be included on the donor's website. Half an hour after the emails, I got another one that basically said something along the line of, hey, you weren't supposed to apply for and get the same award twice in the same academic year. We will now have to deduct the money from your account, but in a more professional way. I forwarded them the go-ahead email along with the award terms and conditions. In my email, I also politely pleaded with something along the line of, hey, you said I could. I don't have money to pay that $5,000, already spent it on textbooks. It isn't fair to punish a hard-working student for faults not their own. I also responded to the 2 bio request emails separately with 2 different about me paragraphs that basically humble brag about how hard I worked and how much I deserve the money. A couple days later, I got an email allowing me to keep both awards. They said the admins have advocated to make up the Golden Scholarship category to put me in. In the email, they also have a lengthy paragraph justifying why I deserved it, probably to avoid admitting that they messed up. As a result of this, the general scholarship guidelines at the university were updated to stipulate that no student will be allowed to get the same scholarship more than once during an academic year. TLDR. First time scholarship application went up. I applied and got it. It reopened within a month but didn't say recipients can't reapply. I applied and got it again. Edit. It is double dipped. Or, you could say I called dibs twice. My bad. English is hard. Thank you. Next. This ended up being longer than I thought, so I've put a TLDR at the bottom. I work as a quality manager at a vegetable growing and packing farm. We are considered an essential business as we grow and pack food, so we have been working throughout the pandemic, just with much more strict hygiene protocols as you could imagine. Part of my job is to make sure that food handling and hygiene practices are followed. So once the pandemic hit, I made it my mission to ensure everyone was following the hand washing and sanitizing procedures correctly. I posted several signs around the sheds giving instructions about what is required and also some tips to help stop the spread. One of these was a generic sign that gave instructions on how to wash your hands. It advised people to wash their hands for 20 seconds or so, or as long as it took you to sing the full alphabet in your head. This is standard practice in the food industry. There were several other rules put in place as well. The wearing of gloves, keeping 1.5 meters apart, sanitizing hands after touching your face, door handles, pallet jacks, forklift steering wheels, etc. I did my best to be accommodating by placing boxes of gloves and hand sanitizer units everywhere so people didn't have to get behind in their work to do what I need them to. Everyone was really good at following the extra rules and was really understanding, except for one of the shed supervisors. He would never wear gloves, was constantly in and out of a forklift without sanitizing, and I'm positive that he wouldn't wash his hands after using the toilet. Impossible to tell for sure, but he never left there with paper towel in his hands drying his hands off like everyone else. This is disgusting at the best of times, let alone at a food packing facility, not to mention during a pandemic. Whenever I pressed him about it, he would say he didn't have time to sanitize. There's a bottle of it right there on each forklift. Couldn't find his gloves, there were dozens of boxes of them, and even tried to tell me that he doesn't use the toilet during the day. When I asked him what he was doing and that, he would just deny being in there and say that he only uses the toilet twice a day, both times at home. He bragged about it as if it was some great achievement. I ended up going over his head and emailed the boss and the owner about it all and asked if they could please sit with him and talk to him about it. He was a supervisor. These were easy rules to follow. Everyone else was doing it, so he has to as well. Both of them agreed and told me they would sort it out. The following day I could see him from a distance following all the rules properly, so I was happy. The system worked. But being the childish man he is, he was giving me the cold shoulder and silent treatment. He was obviously not happy that I went to the bosses about him and got him in trouble. But I didn't care. That's my literal job and I'd do it again. Fast forward a week and I come into work this morning to see all these new signs posted all over the place. All generic stop the spread signs from government websites telling people to be hygienic, keep their distance, stay home if sick, etc. All that stuff we've been hearing for a while now. There was also a new sign at the hand washing station that gave a really long and detailed instruction for people to wash their hands, stating that the process should take 60 seconds. I asked around and found out it was my mate, the supervisor, who put them up. They should have been put up ages ago, he says. If the government come here and see we don't have them up, we'll all be in trouble. I pointed out that there are already signs up all over the place and have been for months. He says that they're not good enough and that his are better. I didn't say a word, but then he said what I was hoping he'd say. If you're going to pick on me for this shit, then you need to make sure everyone follows all the rules properly. Now this guy is not my superior, but he has a massive ego and probably thinks he's second in charge of the whole place or something. I certainly didn't want to argue about it, so I just assured him that I'd do exactly that. You may have guessed where this is going, but it's also worth pointing out that other than the sinks in the toilets, we only have one hand washing sink. We are out on a farm site in a rural area, so clean potable water is scarce. We only have so much pressure available and most of it goes to the vegetable washing sprays, so that's all we have for the time being. Next lunch break I stood by the sink as the workers were about to head back in again. The first person hopped up to wash their hands and did a good job knowing that I was watching, but they only washed for 20 seconds or so. So I told them that they have to wash for the full 60 seconds as per the new sign. They were a bit dumbfounded to start with, so I pointed to the sign and the part where it said 60 seconds. Then I told them that their supervisor wants them to do it this way and he wanted me to make sure you all do it right. So he stood there at the sink and washed his hands for a full minute, rinsed and dried off before the next person came to do theirs. It wasn't long before everyone started chatting about how they're going to be late going back to work. I assured them that they're entitled to their full meal break, so take your time, wash your hands for 60 seconds and if you're late then you're late. There were 14 people in total that had to wash their hands. Everyone took their sweet time and the whole ordeal lasted around 20 minutes. It was incredibly boring to watch, but oh so satisfying. The cool part is that the shed cannot restart if they're a person short. Everyone has to be back and in position before the machines can start back up again, otherwise things jam up and it creates massive problems. The supervisor didn't even notice. I have no idea where he even was during all of this. But the shed didn't restart until about 20 minutes after it should have. So for their next meal break I did it all again. People were well clued on for round 2 and most people just sat in their chairs on their phones rather than queuing up for the sink. This time around the supervisor noticed. We were about 5 minutes late when he came out, saw half of his workers sitting on their phones when they were meant to be back at work already and asked what the hell everyone is doing. I calmly explained that they are washing their hands for a full 60 seconds just like in the sign you put up. He shook his head and went on about how this is ridiculous and they should have been back to work already. I told him I agree, but I was just doing as he told me. He then tried to say that if they're going to do this then they need to wash their hands in their time, not company time. So I announced to those remaining, hear that guys? He reckons you don't deserve your full break and that you should give half of it up to wash your hands. Apostrophe. As soon as I said this he just stormed off muttering under his breath. I stayed there and made sure the last half of the workers did the full minute of hand washing and the shed went back to work late. They lost a full 40 or so minutes of production today and that will be very noticeable on the costing report. I just hope he tries to blame it all on me. I look forward to telling the boss that not only was this all his own doing, but he somehow didn't even notice that everyone was 20 minutes late after their first meal break. Good luck explaining that one. TLDR. Co-worker told me to ensure everyone follows the rules in regards to the hand washing signs he posted, so I did exactly that, which resulted in people spending way too long washing their hands and going back to work late. Thank you. Next. I, 25M, used to work for a marketing company as a graphic designer. I'd been there 5 years and a bit. Started straight out of college and learned the ropes with these guys. They taught me a lot, like everything I needed to know. However, whenever the subject of money came up my boss used to struggle to speak openly and honestly about it. They undervalued the staff and worked them to the bone. However, we were small and growing very quickly. We got some new work, some that I pulled in and landed some pretty big contracts. I was earning a low salary for the job I was doing. I would have earned more working in a bar full time, and the clients we worked for were big players. Think huge multinationals, like fucking big. I'd been on the same salary for most of my time at this company and we just hired 8 new members of staff in the space of a month. Suddenly I became a senior member of staff because of the responsibilities I had to take on to manage these people. I was in the process of moving house at the time and thought it would be a perfect way to start my new life, new job, new home with my partner. Exciting times. My boss and I had spoken openly about promoting me when we hired more staff. When I started I was employee number 2. Madness. I sent them an email asking to have a chat about my salary and job role. They agreed it was the right time to talk about it, so we agreed a time to go for a coffee and went later that day. Brilliant. We got chatting and agreed a figure that was equivalent to 25% extra, around £5k on top of what I was already earning. I was obviously over the moon, paid the deposit for the house, rental, and moved in a week later. Then I got paid less than what I was on before. It's worth mentioning that I was paid hourly up until this point and able to put overtime on my timesheet, and meant I was able to earn that basic salary I was talking about earlier, so a basic 40-hour week would probably have been minimum wage. This was including overtime, so you could imagine my excitement when I thought I was getting that plus 5k pounds more and being able to do a normal working week. Anyway, due to some accounting bullshit, it meant I actually got less than I was on before because it was a calculation based on the amount of hours I was doing. This was not discussed at all, and I'd signed a 40-hour contract. Basically, I kicked off and asked to have a chat right away. He shrugged me off and said there was nothing he could do, completely denying that he lied to my face, and so I quit on the spot. I returned a few days later to do a bit of my notice period and help out. Looking back, I should have never returned, but I wanted to get my things from the office and say goodbye to my colleagues. I nailed every piece of work I got given and offered to help out my colleagues all week. I then heard this rumor that there had been an email sent out requiring employees to agree not to hire me in the future for any work for the company, even though they knew I was going freelance, as I had no other options at such short notice. I saw the email. It was written and sent to everyone but me. How humiliating for everyone. A few weeks later, I got a call from one of my colleagues. They explained that the boss had gone on holiday and there was a few weeks work available for me. So I took it and doubled my freelance rates, effectively paying myself 8x what I was being paid before by the same person. The boss went on holiday a lot, so I was doing 2-week stints every other month. I earned my annual salary in 6 weeks. This is obviously a reflection of employee versus contractor, etc. But still worth mentioning. The best part about this was that one of the jobs I did won an award and got me loads of great press. The boss did not know it was me until the awards shortlist was sent out and I was listed as creative lead on the project. Fortunately for me, I had been billing in advance, so had already been paid for all the work I'd done. Moral of the story: don't show your true colors to your entire workforce expecting them to abide by your ridiculous rules. TL. Doctor. After telling my co-workers not to hire me after I leave the company, they booked me every time he went on holiday for a year. Thank you. Next. So I'm not entirely sure if this fits here, but I wanted to share this ongoing story about our condominium association and our plant war. TLDR. My family moved into a condominium complex closest to the main road and planted mammoth sunflowers for a few years. Condo association made a rule that we can't plant anything covering the first floor windows. We switched to teddy sunflowers. We also planted vegetables like cucumbers and tomatoes in the garden space. Condo association made a rule that edible plants aren't allowed. We now have all our edible plants in approximately 10 planters, all on the landing of our staircase, equally visible to everyone driving by. Some important background info. My family moved from an apartment without any of our own land to grow plants, into a condominium with much more room inside, as well as a little bit of our own space to plant whatever we want. The complex we chose also happens to be the first one you see when you drive into the condominium, though our garden space isn't visible to people driving past the condos on the main road. Our door happens to be accessed by a set of stairs and a landing, which will come into play later. While the staircase bends to the right, on the left side is our garden right below the first floor window. My parents have also always grown up planting and harvesting different things, and thought this would be a great opportunity to plant whatever we want. My mom and my grandma loved to garden and grow different veggies at their house, and my dad grew up on what I guess would be called a farm, but minus the farm animals. My paternal grandparents own a lot of land and grew practically anything they could, so we know quite a bit about gardening. So naturally, we wanted to utilize this new gardening space and have some fun. What was particularly nice was that the condo association was a huge advocate for gardening at the time and heavily encouraged residents to plant things in their spaces. Plus, My dad religiously attends each association meeting and is one of the few people there out of the 40 plus families living here, so you'd think they'd like us. Ha, wrong. The actual story part. We started off our first year with cucumbers and watermelon that ended disastrously, but that's a whole nother story. My dad is also very fond of sunflowers, so we would plant mammoth sunflowers in our garden space. Naturally, the mammoths were huge and grew tall enough to obscure the first floor window. We planted them for several years without any complaint. Then, the condo association board changed. They suddenly made a rule that we can't plant anything growing past the first floor windows. Oddly specific, right? Next year, instead of planting mammoths we switched to teddy bear sunflowers. Very short and very cute. Huzzah, no complaint. But it doesn't stop here. As I mentioned earlier, my parents both enjoy growing edible plants. Some of our favorites being cucumbers and tomatoes. Oh yes, large plants. A few years ago, we planted around 6 stalks of cherry tomatoes in our garden space, just short enough not to cover the window. They were very beautiful, lots of red clusters here and there. The cucumbers were sprawled out before them and had lots of those pretty yellow flowers and cucumbers growing off of it. Yeah, well, you guessed it, the association reared its ugly head once more. This time, they couldn't hit us with that "it's too tall" argument, so a new rule was born. No more edible plants are allowed. Sounds like they were getting jealous of our prosperous garden. Well, no biggie. This year, on top of the small amount of plants we usually grow in planters, we're growing cucumbers, radishes, cabbage, carrots, green beans, and some more in several planters. It's not in the garden space, and we bring them inside every night when it gets cold, so we have yet again circumvented their silly rules. Every day, they go out on our staircase landing to the point where it's difficult to walk by and just as visible to people walking by. In fact, it looks even messier when they get larger. We'll see how they like it this year. I do feel bad for everyone else who was impacted just because we like to garden and we happen to be the first complex visible. I wish they'd just make a community garden or something. Thank you. Next. This happened a little over a week ago. I just haven't gotten around to posting it yet. I work at a popular steakhouse in Arkansas as a head server. I respect my boss immensely, although sometimes his business strategies aren't the brightest. He's a very good man at heart and always wants the best for the restaurant. You'll never see him not smiling. We'll call him Mr. Custard. Shortly before we reopened for business, we did to-go options during full lockdown, but we are now open for dine-in as well. He was given a grant to clean the restaurant as well as possible before reopening. He set out to spend every dime of it. I, as well as many others, was there 40 or more hours a week for 2 weeks doing little else but scrubbing, bleaching, disinfecting, and degreasing every inch of the store. I was really very proud of the job we were doing, as was Mr. Custard. About 3 days before we opened, Mr. Custard asked me to bleach every single cup we own and scrub them by hand. I was one of the more meticulous cleaners, so it's understandable that he would give me this job. This was no small task, and it would take several hours. This was fine by him, as long as every cup was clear and see-through, rather than browning or foggy. After doing almost 200 of them, I found that many were not lightening up, they were just old. I showed Mr. Custard a few and he insisted that I throw away the ones that didn't let up. He wanted only the best. I asked him if he was sure about this, as it would be a lot of cups. Completely positive, he said. I bleached over 400 cups and cleaned each one by hand. Then, as I put each one away, I checked to make sure they weren't foggy. If they were, they got thrown away. When I showed Mr. Custard the finished product, he was initially pleased. Sitting in front of him were pure, perfect cups. Then he realized, only about 1/3 of the cups remained. A large majority of our cups were just too old to be clear again. He maintained his smile, but I could see him dying a little bit inside when I told him that's all we had left. Not surprisingly, we've ordered more cups.